When we first went round there, you'd walk along the beach and all there would be the pumice stone from other parts of the world out of volcanoes. That was the one thing we noticed, that there was a lot of pumice stone, but there was no rubbish at all. There was only driftwood, just ordinary driftwood.
The term marine debris covers a wide range of things. It covers things including litter that come from stormwater drains, plus the litter that comes from the users of the ocean. It also covers things that are washed in from the beaches and the foreshores of our coastlines. The South West Cleanup was orchestrated so that we could clean up 5 beaches in a remote area that demonstrated rubbish that came solely from the ocean. There were no stormwater drains in the area, no human habitation, and therefore all the rubbish that we found on the beaches was rubbish that came from the oceans. The types of rubbish that we found were lots of plastic rope, bait box straps, plastic material from bait boxes, bait saver baskets, a lot of material that could be demonstrated to come from the rock lobster industry that uses that area. We chose the southwest beaches in that area because they represent the rubbish coming from a wide-ranging area, given that it's the conversion point for the Zen and the Southern Ocean currents. This area seems to collect a lot of rubbish that is brought in by those currents and the winds. We found very little that demonstrated rubbish from container ships or international long-lining fishing operations. There was some, and there was some that was identifiably foreign. However, the major sources of rubbish we could fairly well predict came from local sources.
Primarily we wanted to reduce rubbish or pollution related to fishing on beaches, because basically at the beach is very visible, very public, and from our perspective as an industry it was the front line of where the attack's coming from. As an industry person, you've got people doing litter surveys, and there's those bloody blue plastic scraps, and they're going to be there for hundreds of years, and they're ours. So that wasn't helping the perception or the image that we were trying to build, that we are clean and green and friendly. But in the meantime you've got all this big signal that says rock lobster everywhere you go. So we certainly wanted to attack that, and we wanted to stop it coming from the vessels. We also wanted to change the awareness that, of activities and behaviour that they were actually causing problems or pollution problems. And we wanted fishermen to adopt more environmentally friendly inputs to their business, but in a cost-effective way. Then we were also, of course, interested in adequate on-land waste handling facilities. There was no use changing behaviour on the land if there's no facilities to deal with the issue on land. And finally, to end up with a simple code of practice that the industry could buy into at the end.
At the end of the cleanup, the rubbish has all been collected, and it's in a temporary dump site at the moment. We're going to be hopefully getting a fishing boat to come in and pick up the rest of the rubbish.
The first changes I noticed was when the tuna long lines arrived, and plastic started to arrive off those from onto the beaches. Our next changes were when our synthetic ropes, we started using those instead of hemp, and also our cotton nets, we were using nylon nets. And the next change, which was quite dramatic, was the trawlers arriving, and they started to lose nets on the rough ground on the west coast, and it even entangled some of our own propellers and caused boats to sink, quite a lot of problems from that point of view. So it wasn't only the animals that was getting affected, it was also backfiring on us as well. It was starting to affect us too.
The entanglement rate of Australian fur seals in Tasmania is around 2%, and that is amongst the highest in the world recorded for seal entanglements. This seal here is a graphic example of how entanglement slowly kills an animal in the most painful manner. This animal is entangled in trawl net, and as you can see, the trawl net has slowly cut through the skin of the animal, cut through the blubber, cut through the muscle. All the time the material being on the animal has impeded its feeding ability, and then finally the material has garroted it by cutting into the throat, and this ultimately killed the animal. One of the other problems with all this marine debris is it's basically material that's designed to last a long time, whether it's a trawl net or a plastic bag or a packaging strap. It's made of material that's not biodegradable, and therefore it lasts longer and longer. All the time there's material out there accumulating and the animals become entangled. So the longevity is certainly a problem that should be tackled at the government level to make people responsible for the materials they're producing.
Plastic bags can look like the main foods of marine mammals. They can therefore eat plastic bags and become choked up and die as a result.
The storm water is probably at certain times of year one of the worst offenders really. Litter gets down the drains, down through the stormwater access, and it sits down there until it gets blown in there, and it sits there until there's a big rain. And once there's a big rain, you end up with bins full of rubbish collecting in the docks. Fairly, it's styrene cups, obviously lots of cigarette butts, Coke cans. It's fairly general, you know, drink bottles, drink cans. It's generally what you'd call recreational rubbish. It's not generally domestic rubbish, you know, not baked bean tins or bread wrappers or things. Lots of white plastic bags. Well, one of the other issues of concern obviously is domestic waste that makes it into the storm water drains. Herbicides, pesticides, even fertiliser can be quite harmful if you increase the nitrate levels and you cause algal problems and what have you in water. Solvents, petrochemicals, you know, you have a bit of a spill or something on the driveway and you get the garden hose out and down the drain, and it goes into the storm water drain and just flows directly into the river.
I'm standing amongst a sea of plastic debris here, which is pretty much the result of a stormwater outfall we have at the head of the bay here. Now, from this one stormwater outfall, which drains a small catchment of only 500 hectares, mind you, it's a very intensely developed catchment, from that catchment we get the equivalent of about an Olympic-sized swimming pool of rubbish into this bay every year. To put this problem into perspective, it is only one drain, one catchment in the whole estuary, and we have about 55 catchments and over 270 drains along the estuary. On a council level, work is being done to address these problems, and that is being supported by the state government and Commonwealth government. But really this litter wouldn't be here in the first place if people didn't drop it.
What we have seen is, over the last 3 years, is a change in behaviour across the board, where the fishermen on the radio are just beating each other up about these issues. So there's been a shift in mindset. Interestingly, they've taken on board as their problem now, not someone else's, and that's been the major shift through the project, I think.
Yes, so even though this was initiated by the rock lobster industry in the first instance, as soon as they actually had the public announcement about this project, then other sectors of the industry were coming out of the woodwork, and I remember one of them rang up and said, well, you know, we're bigger polluters than the rock lobster industry, we want to be part of this process. They've seen the real benefits that can be achieved through this, and they can see that it's a very good marketing tool. They see that it gives them some moral ground, if you like, to sort of not counter the rabid greenies, but saying that, no, yes, look, we are taking steps to address these issues. We recognise that that is part of our role.
So I believe the solution to all this is for all representatives, organisations in our industry and the state government, which is a very forward looking government at the present moment for small industry, to meet together and forget about the politics of it, the blaming of it, and just go into that room and work out a solution. How we are all going to do our part. Write down what they will do towards it. Forget about the legislation until the very last. Legislation should come last, education first, I honestly believe.
The wider ramifications of this project have included an instant response from a number of the other fishing sectors in the state, and also a lot of government organisations coming forward and saying we can help you. So there's actually been a bringing together of a disparate group, or groups that were seen to be opposing each other, to work together to bring about positive outcome for the environment.
It's really important for me to feel like I can actually do something, that I can have an effect. As an individual, you often feel really helpless because the problem is just, you know, all the problems are so huge. But when you become a member of a group, you realise that together you can do a whole lot, and you inspire each other. And Surfrider is a fantastic way of being able to access similar people who all care really deeply about our marine environment. Making somewhere for our children to have the same kind of love and enjoyment of growing up, you know, at the beach as we do. It's not, you know, whether you're a surfer or a beachcomber or a fisherman, it's the way we move, you know, on this earth, on the beach and whatever that can bring about the greatest change. You know, we can all look after our marine environment much better.